Welcome to the Karuna Life, the podcast where we explore the connection between spirituality and everyday life. I'm Gina Kitzmiller. I'm a professional intuitive, a Reiki master teacher, and a longtime spiritual seeker. Join me as we dive into topics like living a heart-centered life, connecting with our intuition, and unleashing our own power. We'll discuss the metaphysical world, spirit guides, and finding magic in the ordinary. Get ready to embrace your inner mystic and explore the realms of the unseen. Welcome to the Karuna Life. I'm Gina Kitzmiller. And today we are going to talk about psychics and intuitives and why they sometimes get it wrong. This has been a topic that has been on my mind for the last couple of months, so I'm really excited to discuss it with you today. I'm going to explain from my perspective what happens when someone who says they can predict the future or an intuitive tells you information and it doesn't come true. We're going to explain what's going on metaphysically, and then we're going to talk about why it's important to be selective about the providers you use. And of course, I'll give you some tools about how to navigate sessions, and then we'll check in with my guides to see what they would like to contribute today. This is a fun topic. Let's get started. So I wanted to start with a story, actually. And this is a story that is in my upcoming memoir, which I hope to have published next year. So when I was in my 20s, I was living up towards Cleveland, Ohio, and I had an opportunity to go to a potluck with one of my best friends. And so I agreed and went with her. And it was a lovely evening. People brought food and we were having conversation. And at some point, the conversation turned to, all things metaphysical. We were talking about psychics. And someone told me, oh my gosh, there's a psychic that's actually going to be coming tonight. And she's extremely accurate. She's very good. You have to have a reading with her. And she apparently would do impromptu readings for free. And so I was really excited. I wasn't really sure what to expect, although I had had psychic readings before. So I was waiting all night for this woman to show up, and I was very excited. And so she shows up and they said, I don't remember her name, but they said, oh, she's here. And so I turned and I don't know what I expected, but this woman was very disheveled. She looked like she hadn't showered. She was missing teeth. And I thought, oh my gosh, like that's the fortune teller, that's the psychic. And they said, yes, no, she's really good. So I was like, great, I was in. So we sat down at a table and she started to do the reading. So she told me that I was going to be leaving my husband at the time, which was pretty accurate because I was in an unhappy marriage. So I was actually relieved that that was kind of the path it was going. And she told me I was going to then eventually go on and marry one of my soulmates. She said we would have two, if not three children. She said there was definitely two. The third one was a possibility if we would choose to have a third child, that there was a soul wanting to step in that role, but it would be our choice. And then she said that my second husband was going to pass early, right around our 40s. And she went on to say a few other things, but I honestly had kind of tuned out because I just was really excited that she said I was going to eventually marry my soulmate and have children. It was what I wanted to hear. So I left that night and I kind of tucked it away. And then here's kind of the issue sometimes when someone tells you what happens. I did end up getting a divorce and leaving my first marriage. And a few years later, I reconnected with my first love and we started dating again. And I remembered her prediction and I was worried. I remembered that she had said that he was going to pass early in life. And so it was this kind of thought that kept bothering me. And so finally, I just had to put it aside, right? I just thought, you know what? There's no telling that this woman's accurate. So I purposely just kind of blocked it out of my memory. I forgot all about her predictions. We went on to get married. We ended up having children and life moves forward. And about 10 years later, it turns out he did end up passing early. And I was walking the dog a few weeks after Joe had died. And all of a sudden, this woman's prediction came rushing back to me. The memory came back with such clarity that it literally stopped me in my tracks. And I thought, oh my God, someone actually predicted this. They predicted that he was going to die. And I was scrambling to remember the rest of her predictions. Like, what did she say after that? I couldn't remember. And I still don't have it back. I don't remember what she said. I remember she told me that I went on in life, but I don't remember what happened. But I was absolutely stunned because I could not believe that someone had actually predicted it. And in hindsight, what's interesting to me is that she was also accurate about the possibility of a third child because Joe and I had discussed that and something we really contemplated. And then we ended up deciding that we weren't going to pursue that. We had two healthy kids. It felt like our family was complete. But I'm still a little bit in awe at the accuracy of her predictions. I'm still in awe over the accuracy of her prediction. But I also want to talk about what happens when a psychic or intuitive gets it wrong, right? Because that does happen. What happens when they tell you something is going to happen and it doesn't happen in life, doesn't transpire the way that you expect. And the example that I would give is that after my husband passed away, I started dating someone who was a lovely man. And I had multiple people tell me, "Oh my gosh, this is the person that you marry." And I thought, great. That's at the time, that's what I wanted. And yet over time, after a couple years, I had changed and really grown and my heart really shifted. And I realized that I actually did not want to get married. And eventually I ended the relationship. So I kind of thought back and thought, gosh, I had so many people tell me that this was my person, right? What happened? Were they wrong? And I'm going to say, I don't think that they were wrong. And this is what I'd like to bring up with psychics or intuitives. They are reading you in that moment. So I think that when they read me in the moment and they said, yes, we think this is your person, you're going to get married, they were reading one timeline, right? For my life, that timeline was very lit up in that moment. And that looked like based on my decisions and who I was in that moment, where my life could have headed. And yet, over the years, I grew, I changed, and my timeline and my path grew and changed as well. So it's often hard because I understand the desire for predictions, right? Even as an intuitive, I still would love to have someone tell me exactly what my future is going to hold, to go left, to go right. And yet, when I'm in clients' fields, I'm always a little hesitant about giving very specific predictions or to give timelines because of that reason. Everything is fluid and in motion. And I would say that's a good thing because if your life was completely set from start to finish, yes, you are living it, but that's kind of dull for the soul, right? Where's the free will? Where's our choices and decisions? Which is, if you know me, I always loved the Choose Your Own Adventure book series when I was a child. So, because you got to make a decision on how that story was going to go and the ending. And when I was little, I used to always read it one way and then I would immediately go back and make a different decision and see how it ended if I took a different path. And I think life is very much like that, only we don't always get to go back and do a redo, so to speak, right? So if you can imagine kind of like a dark universe with this glowing web in front of us, there's like three areas, one to the left, one that's center, and one to the right of possible paths that are lit up. And then based on that person's situation and their decisions and who they are in that moment, one of those paths is usually a little bit more lit up than the others. You can sense it. This path is the one that's really come to the forefront. That is usually what I try to tune into. Now, I am very cautious about giving specific predictions or timelines. I understand that people would really like me to tell them, you're going to meet a guy in the next 90 days and his name is going to be Ted and Ted is your soulmate. However, for me, I won't get that information. And I asked my guides about it once and they kind of laughed and they said, but you don't want to get that information. And I thought, gosh, they're right. I don't. And the reason is because I worry that if I tell you you're going to meet this dream man named Ted, and you go out and you meet someone named Tim, you might actually not date that person because you think in the back of your mind, gosh, Gina told me his name was Ted. And so you change your behavior based on the information that I told you. So why would a path shift and change, right? So there's these three paths, and one's very lit up. What makes that path change? And I would tell you that is based on free will, and not just your free will, the free will of all the other people that are involved. So let's stick to this example of Ted, because I think this is a good analogy to use. So let's say that I have a session with a client and I say, you know what, there is this really great guy out there for you. You're going to meet him in the next 90 days, and his name is Ted. So as the client's like, great, that sounds wonderful. I really want to meet him. Everything looks like it's in motion. What we have to remember is everyone has free will. The client has free will. They can choose to remain single and look for this person that's going to be coming in named Ted. Ted also has free will. So Ted might already be in a relationship with someone, but maybe they're anticipating that he's going to break off that relationship. So he's single and he decides not to do it for whatever reason. Maybe he's like, the holidays are coming. I don't really want to have this bad breakup right now. So I'm going to wait until, maybe January or later before I'm going to pursue a breakup. Well, now the path has shifted, right? Because his free will has now decided to move that path. And what was really lit up during the session with the client is now starting to not be as lit up. What's going to happen is if that main path is now decided to dim because people are making different decisions, that's now going to change the course of the paths. And another one may start to become a little bit more lit up and activated as these decisions are made. So you see how it is constantly evolving and shifting and changing. And that's really the beauty of it. That's the mystery of it, is we don't know how it's going to unfold. It's all based on free will and decisions moving forward. That's why it's always really important to honor your heart when you are making decisions, because things could have shifted. Even if you had a session with someone that seemed extremely accurate last week, we could be in a different ballpark the following week. So I have a friend, Lori, who's a very good intuitive, and she always says that when she does a reading, she's kind of doing it between the next like 30 to 90 days. That's her kind of sense of that time frame and how things can shift. So if she predicted something, let's say today, and now we're in March, and that hasn't happened, it's not that she's wrong. It's that things have now moved and shifted tremendously from today until March of next year. And that's what I think oftentimes people tend to forget. We forget the power of our choices and we forget the power of free will. So, this is why it's really important to be selective on the providers that you use. And oftentimes, it's okay to have a chance reading like I did in my 20s, and that might be divinely guided. Maybe I needed to hear something in that reading at that time. But I would be very careful about who we use for intuitives or psychics, because you want to make sure that they have very high intentions and vibrations, because they are reading the field. And if someone has lower energy or lower vibrations, I think frankly, they tend to read lower timelines or possibilities, or that information can get a little bit jaded based on the filter that it's coming through. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what the intuitive or the psychic says, you always want to take what resonates with you. I've had people tell me incredibly accurate things, and I've had people tell me things that were so far off the mark that when I left the reading, I thought, I don't believe any of that. Or I believe maybe 10% of what you just said resonates, and the rest is completely off with me. And I asked my guides about that, and they said, you want to take what resonates, right? Even if it's only 5 or 10%. And the rest of it, you just have to let go. And sometimes it's not necessarily the fault of the psychic or intuitive. It could be that your energy isn't quite in resonance with them. It could be that they're trying to read something from your spirit guides or your loved ones, and they're not in resonance with them. I actually had that happen in the last year where someone had told me about a very gifted psychic intuitive. They said that this person could communicate with those in spirit. So when I booked the session, I had to book it several months out. So of course I thought, incorrectly that this meant this was going to be a really great choice for me. And when I got to the session, the person could not read anything off of my loved ones. They could not read me accurately. They actually asked me if I believed in guides and said, well, you have spirit guides. And I thought, yeah, buddy, this is what I do for a living. Like, I kind of know that, right? And I kind of laughed about it. And afterwards, it was a really great lesson because I asked my guides, like, what happened? This person was supposed to be very good at this, and they just completely got nothing for me at all. And they said it was to remind me about resonance and that my resonance was not in line with this person. So they said it wasn't that he was not good at what he does. He was actually very good for the people he was meant to work with, but it was that he was not in resonance with me. And it was a very, really good lesson for me, actually, of learning that I needed to lean in and ask myself, is this the right person for me? Or is there someone better? And I didn't stop to ask that question. So, how do you navigate sessions? So, when you leave a session, I think it's really important for you to own your own power. So when you go in, I always think it's important to set an intention. If there's something that's weighing on your heart, you can ask for your loved ones in spirit, for your guides and angels, if you believe in them, to help you get the most accurate reading possible. And I think it's important to be honest. Hey, here's what's weighing on my heart. Can you guys help me with this? Can you give me some clarity or information on this topic? This is what I would like to know about. And then you want to be open to it. So when you get done with the session, you want to take some time to sit with it. And I think often what happens is people want to give their power away. Just because someone says that they're an intuitive or a reader or a psychic does not mean that they are getting 100% accurate information for you. The only person that can really determine that is you. So you want to take time to really sit with that reading to say, okay, gosh, these parts really resonated with me, but you know what? They said this and that just doesn't feel right to me. But it's important for you to stop and ask that question. And it's a step that a lot of people don't do. They take the entire reading at 100% and then they apply it to their life and apply it to their path, so to speak, moving forward. And I would really caution against that. You want to take only what resonates and to move forward in that direction based on what your heart and your power is telling you and not give your power away to someone else. So, I also want to point out because I feel like I've kind of bashed a little bit of psychics and intuitives, and being an intuitive myself, I get it. We do the best that we can do in the moment. And there are some really great providers out there that are very accurate. And I do know people that are very good at actually predicting future events and what's going to happen. At the end of the day, it's really one I think we need to ask ourselves what most resonates with us. And then we come from that place. So if you have a reading and it feels 100% spot on, it's important to continually still check in with yourself as you're moving through life. It's because, again, things are going to be changing. So 3 months from now, check in. Does that still feel right? Did that person tell you that you were going to open a retreat center? And that felt really good to you back in fall. But now that we're in spring, you've gotten a little bit further into it. And either one, it doesn't feel like it's the right time, or maybe your interests have started to change. And now a retreat center doesn't really feel right. Maybe you want to open a yoga studio, or you're being called to move into a completely different direction. You always want to take time to check in on that because the future is not fixed. So that's one of the things that I would suggest that we constantly do is to be checking in to ask ourselves, does this still feel right on my soul level? What does my soul or my higher self want me to do moving forward? And to allow some breath and some freedom for that to grow and change as you grow and change. So I want to ask my guides, of course, if they have anything that they would like to chime in on that. And they're saying that they want to point out two things. One, going to a psychic or intuitive can be really helpful. It can be very comforting to kind of get a sense of where the path is laid out. They're saying sometimes it can give you good information, even on where you don't want to go, right? Which is always good. And they're also saying that sometimes the information is kind of coded or more symbolic. And that's part of where we sometimes lose it in translation. So they may be saying something that is a little bit more symbolic or something that they want you to know and kind of tuck away. And yet our minds love to create a story. We want to create that narrative for our life. And so sometimes we take it in one direction and we start creating a story or a narrative that it's really based on very little information. And we get kind of locked in then to the story that we are creating. So they're saying to remind everyone that it's always helpful to kind of pull back and really look at the bigger picture. So they're saying we write ourselves into very narrow minded stories where we can really pull back and how can we be a little bit more expanded and to take a look at what's in front of us. So I hope that that helps. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to email me, Gina at thekarunalife.com. And of course, as always, if you like this podcast, please consider leaving us 5 stars and following us. So I hope that that helps and have a great rest of your day.